There are too many championships in the WWE. Right now, there are 11 different titles in the WWE. When there are too many titles, the titles become devalued. In order to increase the value for championships, the WWE needs to reduce the amount of championships on the main roster. There are two set of titles in particular that need to be unified. And in this video, we're going to focus on the women's world titles. The WWE Women's Championship and the WWE Women's World Championship need to be unified. We are going to discuss my idea, my reasons for why these titles need to be unified and when that match can take place.
Jayvardy.
Jayvardy.
This Jayvardy.
Jayvardy. Thank you, Jayvardy.
Jayvardy.
Jayvardy. Oh, Jayvardy. Oh my gosh.
So here we're looking at all the different titles on the main roster of the WWE. On Raw, you have the World Heavyweight title, the Women's World title, the Men's Intercontinental title, the Women's Intercontinental title, and the World Tag Team titles. Over on SmackDown, you have the WWE title, the Women's WWE title, the United States title, the Women's United States title, and the WWE Tag Team titles. And then competing on both shows, sometimes it's on Raw, sometimes it's on SmackDown. They kind of go back and forth, is the women's tag team titles. Now, right now, the WWE is doing the thing where on Raw, it's the world titles, and on SmackDown, it's the WWE titles. If you're going to have multiple titles in the same division, this is how I prefer it to be named. I hated when they were called Raw tag team titles and SmackDown tag team titles. I hated when they were called, the Universal title, blah, blah, blah. WWE and World is the way to go. But there are too many titles. Just look at this screen. 11 different championships to be won in WWE. That is way too much. And like I said in the intro of this video, when there are too many titles, titles become devalued. It becomes a you get a belt, you get a belt, you get a belt. There's been that meme in wrestling for several years now of you get a belt, you get a belt, they get a belt, they get a belt. Everyone gets a belt. And when that becomes the situation, title wins mean nothing. And also, when there are too many titles, titles kind of replace feuds in a sense of wrestlers aren't matched up against each other because there's a personal or storyline driven feud between them, but they're paired up to wrestle because there's a title on the line, which makes booking and creativity extremely lazy. So when there are too many titles, you have titles becoming devalued. You have the meme of everyone gets a title, but you also have the booking and creative of, the writers not having to write storylines between wrestlers and matches being feud and storyline driven, but rather they're wrestling for championships. And championships often make feuds very lackluster and just very lazy in general. Now, world title feuds will always be the main event of every single pay-per-view or PLE, whatever you want to call them. That's the driving force of pro wrestling, is there's a world champion at the top of the card and everyone else is fighting to go after their title. That's always how pro wrestling has worked, and that's always how pro wrestling will work. But when the entire card is just filled with title, what you find is there is no personal feuds anymore. There is no, storyline driven hatred and conflict between characters. It's just wrestler A versus wrestler B for title C. And it makes pro wrestling extremely boring at the end of the day. There are too many titles in the WWE. 11 titles for a main roster, even though there are two shows, there is Raw and there is SmackDown. That's too many titles. And I do not buy into the idea of, well, Raw has this title, so SmackDown should have a counterpart title. I don't buy into that. I buy into that for, mid-card titles. But when it comes to world titles and tag team titles, I don't buy into that at all. There are 3 titles, in my opinion, that need to be unified. One of them I just don't see happening within the next year, so we'll leave that kind of out of this video. But the other 2, there's no excuse for them to be separate titles, and they need to be unified. The 3 titles I want to see unified are the men's world titles, which again, I don't see that happening anytime soon. They just created this new world heavyweight title not too long ago. It's only been defended at 2 WrestleManias thus far. I just don't see it. I can maybe see it happening sometime before or at WrestleMania 43, not 42, the next one, but the one after the next one, 43. It's possible that sometime before 43 or at 43, those two titles are unified. I just don't see it happening before or at WrestleMania 42. So we'll kind of leave the men's world titles out of this. But make no mistake, eventually those titles need to be unified as well. But the two titles that I think can and should be unified as soon as possible are the women's world titles and the men's tag team titles. This video is going to focus on the women's world titles, so let's talk about the tag team titles very quickly. Why are there two different men's tag team champions? It is insanely ridiculous, the idea that Raw and SmackDown has their own set of men's tag team champions. It's ridiculous. The tag team titles at this point in WWE are by far, far and away, the most devalued titles you can possibly win. Not only is it, tag team wrestling, you're not a singles competitor when you're a tag team champion, obviously, but many people for years have been talking about how there is no real tag teams left in the WWE. It's always just random wrestlers paired together and they eventually become tag team champions. There's very few actual legitimate viable tag teams and bona fide tag teams in WWE. And having two sets of titles when that's the case is just, it's ridiculous. And I don't buy into, Raw and SmackDown should both have tag team champions for the men's division. Why? Why? It's one division. It's the tag team division. And you already struggle with, we don't have enough real tag teams. Just have one set of tag team titles. Unify the Raw and WWE, or unify the world and the WWE tag team titles, the Raw and SmackDown variants of the tag team titles. Unify them, and that immediately drops you down to 10 titles. And then once you unify the women's titles, that brings you down to 9. And 9 is still too much. Like I said, eventually they need to unify the men's world titles as well. But think of how much better the title scene will look when there's one women's world champion, one men's tag team champions, and one women's tag team champions. Which brings me back to the point of, why do we need two different set of men's tag team titles when there's already a second set of tag team champions and the women's tag team champions? Get rid of having two separate tag team titles for the men. It's insane. They need to be unified ASAP. At the absolute latest, they need to be unified at WrestleMania because this is getting ridiculous. And in my WrestleMania Dream Card, which you can find on my channel, I do have the WWE and World Tag Team titles unified. But like I said, this video is going to focus on the Women's World title. And I do believe that the WWE Women's Champion, Tiffany Stratton, and the new Women's World Champion, StephanieVaquer, they need to unify those titles, and they need to unify them ASAP. And there are multiple reasons for that. I'm going to discuss them in this video, part of which I've already discussed now, and the fact that there's simply too many titles, and this would reduce the amount of titles and add more prestige. But the minute they introduced the Women's Intercontinental and Women's United States titles to the company, it made having two world champions obsolete, because those titles now are used as stepping stones, or traditionally Intercontinental and US titles are used as stepping stones. They're used to build up young or up and coming wrestlers. They don't necessarily have to be young in age, but young in the sense of they're new to the roster, or they're the workhorses. They're the most talented wrestlers on the roster. Those are the people that you give the Intercontinental and US title to, and as you try to build up their character and build them up to becoming a world champion. Alternatively, what they can also be used for is main eventers who are currently not in world title contention for whatever reason. They're just not in the world title contention. They're not seen as being in the immediate plans of being world title contention, but you need something for them to do. And then, the Intercontinental and US title is there for them to win. Someone that you would see win multiple intercontinental titles over their career was Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho was an upper mid card to lower main event level talent. So when he wasn't in, main event title picture, they would often, throw the Intercontinental title on him or have him in Intercontinental title feuds. And that's perfect for someone like Chris Jericho when they're not being used in the main event because it allows them to work with mid card level talent, which also elevates those mid card talent. It gives him something to do. And when he eventually does lose the Intercontinental title to somebody, he's given somebody a rub when they win that title off of him. So as soon as the women's division got a US and Intercontinental title added to their division, it made having 2 world championships obsolete. 5 titles for the women's division, and make no mistake, the women's division in WWE right now is incredibly stacked. It is the best women's roster they've had maybe ever in their entire history of being a company, but it's certainly up there. They are stacked. They have so many high-end talent in the women's roster, but 5 titles is still too much for a division that does not get equal screen time that the men get. And some people might argue of, well, women should get as much screen time as men and it should be 50-50. Half the show is for men, half the show is for women. Okay, that's fine, but that's not the reality of it, and that's not the discussion we're having here. But even if that was a situation, which it's not, it's still too many titles for one division to have. Having those 2 mid-card titles made having 2 world champions obsolete because the whole reason you had 2 women's world champions in the first place was they felt that they needed, they needed titles for that roster to compete for. And obviously, one world title will always be seen as higher than the other. Usually, when there's world titles and WWE titles, the WWE titles are actually higher than the world titles. It kind of doesn't really make sense if you think about just the names of it, but that's always how it's been looked. When there is a world title or a world heavyweight title, the WWE title is always the one that is historically the main title and seen as higher up in the hierarchy of, championship values. So the world titles, in a sense, were the intercontinental titles of that division. Not maybe slightly more prestigious than what an intercontinental title would be, but it was still the secondary title, even though it had a world title name attached to it. But now that you have 2 mid-card titles, it's turned into a situation where there is just too many titles in the division. You have tag team titles that has been used as both a main event level title in the women's division and also a mid-card level title in the division. The women's tag team titles actually have more prestige than both the men's tag team titles have right now, which is another reason the men's tag team titles need to be unified, by the way. But yeah, it's just too many titles for the division. And once they introduce the women's US and Intercontinental titles, it's become apparent that they need to unify the women's world titles. And the main reason for that right now is you have a women's world champion that simply should not be world champion. And I know StephanieVaquer is a fantastic wrestler, but she simply should not be world champion. She should be Intercontinental champion right now, not world champion. And I'm going to discuss that. But this is the reality of the situation. The Intercontinental and US titles have no reason to exist if someone like StephanieVaquer is going to win the women's world title right away. So you either need to get rid of those 2 titles, which they just brought in like the last year, so that's not going to happen, or you need to unify the world titles, which is way more realistic and what should probably happen anyways. That way, in the women's division, you have one clear world champion at the top, then you have 2 mid-card champions in the Intercontinental and US title, and then you have the tag team titles, which kind of like forms like a diamond, where at the bottom of the diamond it can actually be a main event or mid-card level title depending on how it's used. But it's like a diamond of the world title at the top, the 2 mid-card titles in the middle, and then, the women's tag team titles at the bottom, right? It's time to unify the women's world titles, and the minute I saw StephanieVaquer win the title at WrestlePalooza, I was convinced that there are too many titles in this division and they need to be unified immediately because she should have won the Intercontinental title at WrestlePalooza, not the world title. Okay, so here are some comments that I made on a video, and it got a little bit of a discussion going, and I'm going to read them out here as an introduction to my next point. My original comment on someone else's video, wrestling related obviously, was StephanieVaquer is the world champion and Becky is the IC champion. Why is the IC champion an established main eventer and the world champion is someone who hasn't been on the main roster even a year yet? What is the point of the women's US and IC title if they are just going to throw world titles on women without building them up? This is obviously a question of why is StephanieVaquer, who hasn't even been on the roster for a year and has no real build-up or established relationship or connection to the WWE audience, why is she winning a world title when the US and IC title exist? The entire point of those titles is to give it to women like Stephanie to build them up. So here's some comments I got back. Stephanie deserves it, that's why. Okay, sure. Then someone commented, and this is the person I responded to, saying, bro, Stephanie is not a rookie. She's more than capable of being world champion. We already know she's great in the ring, and when she polishes her English, she's going to be set. This is my response to them. There is a difference between being real life ready and storyline ready. She is not an established WWE star. Becky is. The two of them should be swapped. Stephanie should have been built up as an IC champion for a while until she was ready. There is no point to the IC title if they are just going to give women like her the world title without winning the IC title first. And let's focus on the first point I made there of there is a difference between being real life ready and being storyline ready. In real life, this is what I meant by that. In real life, StephanieVaquer is a better wrestler in the ring than probably every woman on the roster except Io Sky, who she actually beat at WrestlePalooza, coincidentally or uncoincidentally, for the vacant women's world title. She is a better wrestler in the ring in real life than everybody else on the roster. She is more skilled in the ring than everyone on the roster except probably Io Sky and maybe someone like Asuka, who's also been wrestling for decades. Other than those two, she is without a doubt more skilled in the ring than every single woman on the roster. So she should be world champion, right? Well, no, she shouldn't, because she is not an established WWE star. And I don't just mean that, oh, she hasn't been on the roster for a year yet. That's not what I mean. What I mean is she does not have a connection with the WWE audience yet. Not everyone is this crazy internet mark that knows everything about every single wrestling agency around the world. And, not everyone knows the history of her wrestling around the world. Not everyone has followed her career around the world. Not everyone knew who she was before she stepped in a WWE ring. Inside WWE, she has not built a relationship with the audience yet. I look at someone like Sami Zayn, who has been in WWE for years and years now, and has obviously been wrestling for years and years longer than that, like StephanieVaquer did. He has not won a world title yet, but when he does win the world title, it's going to be a moment. Why is it going to be a moment? Not because he's been a wrestler for a bunch of years, but because he's been inside WWE and has built a relationship and a connection to the audience for years. And we have seen him fail to win the world title, and we've seen him build up the ranks of WWE. So when he finally wins, it's going to mean something because he's put in the time, the effort, and the work to establish a connection with the audience. And we've seen a story of him rising through the ranks to finally win the world title when eventually that happens. Someone like StephanieVaquer, the majority of the audience is just getting to know her. You don't give a world title to someone you're just getting to know, or someone that your audience is just getting to know. That's not how world titles in wrestling works. And then people will counter that, well, what about Brock Lesnar? Brock Lesnar won the WWE title when he was only 25, and he was in WWE for like 6 months when he won the WWE title. There is a huge difference between someone like StephanieVaquer and Brock Lesnar. This is the difference between them. StephanieVaquer, you look at her and you see someone who looks like, a upper echelon indie wrestler. To someone who's been watching wrestling as long as I have, I look at her and I see just like her image, the look. In wrestling, there's the look. When I see her and I see her look, I see, okay, that's like an upper echelon indie level wrestler. When you put Brock Lesnar standing beside The Rock in 2002, Brock Lesnar looks like he can beat the crap out of The Rock, who's the biggest star in the company. Because remember, Austin is gone at this point. Brock Lesnar looks like as big of a star and someone who can kick the biggest star's ass when they're standing beside each other. And he's already a poster man. You can literally put him on a poster beside The Rock and he looks like he belongs. In terms of the look, he was already a star before any of us even knew who he was. As soon as we all saw him, he was a huge star. And you put him in the ring with The Rock, and not only does he look like he belongs, he looks like he can kick his ass. That's completely different from StephanieVaquer. You put her in the ring next to Rhea Ripley, she doesn't look like she can kick Rhea Ripley's ass. She doesn't look like she's a bigger star than Rhea Ripley. She doesn't look like she's as big of a star as Rhea Ripley. You put her in the ring next to Bianca Belair, she doesn't look like she can kick Bianca Belair's ass. She doesn't look like she's a bigger star or as big of a star as Bianca Belair. That's just not the case. It's not the case. She is not an established WWE star. We are all just getting to know her, and we're not all familiar with her story. And that's why you don't give her the world title. It doesn't matter that she's a better wrestler than everybody on the roster. That doesn't matter. The WWE is more than just in-ring skill. Being the best wrestler in the world doesn't mean you're a WWE superstar. And what I mean by that is the Rock was never the best wrestler on the roster, and yet he was the 1A or 1B alongside Stone Cold Steve Austin. Hulk Hogan wasn't even close to being the best wrestler on his roster, and yet he was the biggest star. John Cena, I hate to break it to you, Gen Z. I know you love him and grew up with him. He was never the best wrestler on his roster in terms of skill, not even close. Yet these guys were at the top of the card. StephanieVaquer, yes, you are a better wrestler than everyone on the roster, fine. But you're not an established star. You haven't built a connection with this audience yet. Not everyone knows your story because we're still getting to know you. She should not be world champion. What they should have done when Naomi relinquished the world title, this is what they should have done. It wouldn't even have had to change the WrestlePalooza pay-per-view at all. Naomi should have relinquished her world title because she's real life pregnant, right? Okay, we understand that. What they should have done was they should have had Becky Lynch come out and be like, I'm the Intercontinental Champion. I'm next in line on this show as the Intercontinental Champion. I'm a former multiple time Women's World Champion. I main evented WrestleMania for the first time ever. I was the first woman to win a WrestleMania main event for a Women's World title. I'm the world champion. She can't be here to be world champion, then I'm the world champion. And what they should have done was had Becky hand over the Intercontinental title and be awarded the world title. That way you have the world title on an established main event star. And then you could have also had the parallels of Seth is the men's world champion, Becky is now the women's world champion, and then they face Punk and AJ, right? And now it's the IC title that is vacated. And then at WrestlePalooza, you have Io Sky and StephanieVaquer for the IC title. Stephanie beats Io to get a big win over a star like Io Sky, who the WWE audience is familiar with, and a former world champion. And she wins the Intercontinental title at WrestlePalooza. Literally, they wouldn't have had to change the script at all. Just do exactly what you did, except it's for the Intercontinental title. And then you would have an Intercontinental champion who is on her way up the ranks. Someone the audience is just getting to know, who's an incredible wrestler. And as they get to know her, and as CEO Jordan said, it's spelled with an X, Jordan, so that's why I was pronouncing it weirdly. But as CEO Jordan said, she's not a rookie. She's capable of being world champion eventually. And as she's polishing her English and getting to know the audience, she's Intercontinental Champion. That's the point I'm making. At WrestlePalooza, she should have won the IC title, not the world title. StephanieVaquer being world title makes the Intercontinental title pointless. Also, by the way, if Becky was world champion, You would also have Becky versus Tiffany right now, while Seth versus Cody. So again, having that parallel of having Becky and Seth being the two world champions, right? The Intercontinental title is pointless. Its entire purpose is to give to someone like StephanieVaquer. There's no point in the Intercontinental title existing in the women's division if you're just giving her the world title. What's the point of the Intercontinental title? The Intercontinental title has always, always, always been a stepping stone up the ladder. Its entire purpose is for someone like StephanieVaquer, who has all the potential in the world, but we don't know her yet. Why didn't she win the Intercontinental title first? That's my biggest question and my biggest gripe with her being the world champion. But she is the world champion, and she is scheduled to face Tiffany Stratton at CrownJewel. So at CrownJewel, we have the WWE Women's Champion Tiffany Stratton versus the World Champion StephanieVaquer to win the what is now going to be an annual CrownJewel, single night champion. Last year it was Liv Morgan who was the women's CrownJewel and Cody Rhodes for the men. The CrownJewel title is so stupid. We don't even really need to discuss that. It is a stupid concept. It's literally just filler. It's literally a filler pay-per-view or a filler PLE. I'm old school, so that's why I call them pay-per-views, but it is literally just a filler PLE. We don't need to rant about that too much. But the point is, it's Stephanie and Io, the two women's world champions, are going to be facing off at CrownJewel. This is what they should do. Stephanie should win this match. There's no point in Tiffany winning that match. In fact, Tiffany's being a little bit overbooked right now. I actually do think Tiffany Stratton should be the world champion all the way to WrestleMania to give her one of those epic over a year-long title reigns and have her enter WrestleMania as champion. I think it will really give her a big profile boost, and it'll make her she'll be overbooked and some fans will be sick of her by that point, but it will give her a big profile and big star feel having her be champion that long and having her enter WrestleMania in back-to-back years as champion in the same title reign. I think that's what should happen. But here's how they should handle this. At CrownJewel, Stephanie should win, and this is why Stephanie should win. There's no point in giving her the world title at WrestlePalooza to then lose to Tiffany at CrownJewel. You've already given her the world title. You've already bit that bullet. So you might as well have her beat Tiffany, and it'll also give Tiffany a loss, which will help, kind of settle that she's being overbooked feeling to her. I would have StephanieVaquer win this match. Then what I would have happen is have Stephanie come out on Raw to celebrate being the CrownJewel champion. And then I would have Tiffany come out and interrupt her. And Tiffany can talk about how she's haunted by the loss and she's haunted by the idea that she may not be the top of this division in this company after all. There might be someone that's better than her in StephanieVaquer. That at CrownJewel, Stephanie showed that Tiffany still has a long way to go before she can be the top of the card, before she can really truly be the women's champion of WWE. And that's when Tiffany should throw out the idea. Survivor Series. Me and you, the world titles on the line, the winner to become the new undisputed WWE Women's Champion. And obviously you have Stephanie accept this match. And there you go. Survivor Series. Tiffany, Stephanie, the undisputed women's world title on the line. That will make their rematch feel so much more important than the CrownJewel match, because now not only is it the two world champions colliding, but it actually means something this time. It's not just filler. It's not just a filler match to get through a month. This is an actual meaningful match that has purpose and then will have long-term effects on the aftermath and the future of the company, right? And it will have the buildup of Stephanie still is recent in this title reign, and she not only beat Io at WrestlePalooza, but then she beat Tiffany at CrownJewel, right? The buildup will be much bigger. The match will feel hugely important for both, which will help Stephanie get over more and will help Tiffany stay over. And then at Survivor Series, you have Tiffany get the win, and you have Tiffany become the undisputed WWE Women's World Champion, and then she holds that belt till WrestleMania. And then she loses it at WrestleMania because she can't hold the title forever. But this would be perfect. It would accomplish three massive things. One, it would help reduce the amount of titles in WWE, which there's too many of. Two, it will get the world title off StephanieVaquer when she should not have been given the world title as soon as she was. But in getting the world title off of her, she's been in three huge matches in three pay-per-views in a row, which will help kind of establish her as a, like, I'm here and I'm a big deal, right? And then we can start building her up the ladder towards winning the world title back eventually and give her a proper build-up. And three, it will make Tiffany like an S tier level profile at that point. Nobody will be able to deny that she is like one of the top main eventers in the company. She's a poster girl of this company, and she could be on her way to being built up as like the next face of the company, because the next face of the company, like the next Roman Reigns, is not necessarily a man. Like that the women's division is so elevated these days, and the women's matches are getting, better reviews and better hype, and just better. They're getting better fanfare than the men's matches are at a lot of shows, and that's not uncommon. That's not uncommon anymore. If Tiffany is to become the undisputed women's world champion, it would make it clear that she is quite possibly in line to be the next face of the company, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. I think she has the look of a star. I think she's getting better and better in the ring with every match she has. She's clearly very athletic. Like I said, she has the look of the star, which is honestly the most important thing in wrestling. And her character is a little bit kind of kiddie, I would say, kind of childish and kiddie, but all she needs to do is get in some really personal feuds, and her character will mature with those personal feuds. And that's on the writing team. That's not necessarily on her, because they haven't really given her the opportunity for her character to mature at all. But if they, give her some personal feuds and start putting her in, kind of heavy duty programs with other women, her character will have the chance to mature. But that's how I would do it. At Crown Jewel, I would have Stephanie beat Tiffany, become the Crown Jewel champion that night. Tiffany comes out to challenge Stephanie for a title unification match. It takes place at Survivor Series, and Tiffany wins the title to A, reduce the amount of titles in WWE, B, have Stephanie be in huge programs up till Survivor Series, but then will allow her to be built up properly afterwards, and C, put Tiffany in the position to possibly be one of the next faces, if not the next face of the company, which they are currently looking for the next face of the company. And why not give her the opportunity to show that she can be that person? And by giving her the undisputed women's world title, it would certainly give her that opportunity. Okay, all that being said, there are other things I want to discuss in the world of wrestling. I want to discuss who I think John Cena's final opponent should be, but also what John Cena's booking should be from Crown Jewel through the rest of his retirement tour. I think the majority of fans, even the majority of casual fans, have accepted the fact that John Cena's retirement tour has not been what we all thought it would be, and I'm not surprised at all, because when I first heard John Cena announce his retirement tour, I thought he was doing a full year of full-time WWE schedule, and that was never the case. He made it clear right off the bat that he had, I can't remember the exact number, but it was 30 something. What was it? 33 or 36 dates. Like, he announced his retirement tour, and then he did a press conference after, and he said that he signed up for 36 dates or something like that, whatever the total number was. And immediately, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, well, this is going to be very underwhelming because he's not going to have the opportunity to wrestle all that many wrestlers, first of all. And second of all, he's not going to have the time to build up feuds properly. So it's going to be like what it's turned out to be. He's going to wrestle a bunch of people he's wrestled before. So it's basically just a nostalgia tour, like, which is, I guess, what like rock bands and stuff do when they go on retirement tours. It really is just a big nostalgia fest. So I guess like that's kind of in line with how this stuff usually works in terms of like a tour, like a literal retirement tour. But I think we've all been underwhelmed by John Cena's retirement tour. You know, we can beat that as long as we want to. It is what it is. Like I said, I'm not surprised. It was never going to be amazing because he didn't actually sign up for a full year. I thought when John Cena announced that on Raw, I thought he was like committing to like 90 dates. You know, like um, one or two appearances a week, like minimum once a week, but sometimes twice a week, right? Like he's going to be on Raw every single week. Sometimes he's going to be on SmackDown. He's going to be on all the PLEs. That's not what we got. We got him, you know, for the 30 whatever dates it was. But anyways, the next video I want to do is going to be discussing who I think John Cena's final opponent should be and his booking from Crown Jewel through December to end his career. I have a lot of ideas, and that's going to be my next video. But I hope you enjoyed this video, and make sure you keep me in mind or subscribe to the channel so that when I upload the John Cena video, you can see that as well. Okay, thank you everybody for watching this video. I'm Jayvardy. I'm out.